Hey guys, long time no see. So today I'm going to be making a dress out of this beautiful stretchy fabric. So it has stripes, so I'm going to be using the stripe side to be on the vertical side, right? I hope you understand what I mean. So because I don't want to look big in the dress, so that's why I'm keeping the stripes vertically. So I will just fold it in 4 and measure if it's going to be enough for me, which is using the largest circumference of my body, divide by 4 to find out if it will be enough for me. So after I'm done doing that, I'm going to be marking the length of the dress, which is 47. Now I'm marking 47, is actually going to be 45, but I'm using 47 because I'm going to be hemming the dress with 2 inches. So by the time I mark that, I'm going to mark my armhole measurement, which ordinarily should be 10 inches from my shoulder down, but I'm not going to be using 10 inches because it's a stretchy fabric and I want the dress to be a bodycon dress, so I'll be using 9 inches. So that's what I marked. After that, I'm not even marking my bust point, I'm just marking my waist, then from my shoulder to my waist, and from my shoulder to my hip, then I have my length. So that's what I'm marking, and I'm going ahead to rule it. So now by the time I'm done on my shoulder line, I'm going to be marking my 3 inches 8 inches shoulder standard. Then I'll be connecting this neckline to my 1 inch shoulder slant, which you can see. Now my shoulder measurement is 18 inches, so instead of the 8 inches I extended it to be 9 inches. So by the time I'm done on my bust measurement, I added my, on the chest measurement I added my bust line, on my affluence I added my affluence or my waist, and then on my hip I added my hip measurement. Then on the knee I minus 6 inches from my hip measurement, and that's what I'm going to be using. So I just went ahead to curve, use my French curve to make my curves. Mind you, I'm not going to be adding any sewing allowance to this dress, and all the measurements I added was a quarter of my measurement, right? So a quarter of my bust, a quarter of my affluence, and a quarter of my hip. Now for my neckline, I want it to be 4.5 inches, or no, sorry, 4 inches. So I added 1 inch on my shoulder slant and 4 inches on the length as well. So I initially wanted to do the dress a 4-corner neck, but come to think of it, I prefer a round neck, which I'm going to be curving much later. I just ended up doing a scoop neckline, but initially it was a 4-corner neck. So I'm not adding any sewing allowances, which you shouldn't as well, because the fabric is elastic, right? So I just went ahead to cut out my fabric, and even the back side actually is the neck is deep as well. So that's just what I did. Now I'm going to be cutting my sleeve with the remaining fabric. Now I forgot to tell you that I used 1.5 inches sewing 1.5 yards of fabric in general. So I just made my sleeve length and I marked my cap's height. Then on my cap's height measurement, I just marked my biceps measurements. Then I'm making my curve. I have a standard basic bodice or basic sleeve pattern which you can use. I'll be linking it up here in case this is too fast for you. Then you watch that video before you watch this. So I just went ahead to cut out my sleeve, and that is it, guys. So this dress is pretty easy and is beginner friendly. So these are all my panels. You can see my front. Then I went ahead to cut a facing for my neck line, right? So those are my facing on it. If you like, you can just hem the neckline, but it wouldn't sit well. So I went ahead to sew my facing to my front and back neckline. Then I top stitched the sewing allowance, pushing them towards the facing so that it sits nice and relaxed inside of your clothes. So this is what it looks like now before I pressed it. So I did not press this dress until I was done. And make sure you notch before you when you're done, before you top stitch, make sure you notch. So now I'm going to be joining the shoulder of my dress. So I pretty much just matched right sides together, and then my facing down as well. Then I flipped one side of the facing to the other side so that it sandwiches all the sewing allowances inside, like to have that inside neat and clean finish. So that was what I did, and I sewed the shoulder. So by the time I was done, I just trimmed down some of the sewing allowances so that it sit nicely. Now after I was done with this dress, I realized I should have taken more allowances from that shoulder line to enable it sit properly. So make sure you take more than ½ inch, especially from the beginning of the shoulder sewing. So that was what I just did there, and I'm doing the second one now. When you get to the hem, make sure you back stitch so that by the time you want to fix your sleeve, it doesn't give you issues. So I just trimmed down my sewing allowance as well, and this is what the back and front looks like. Now I'm going to be adding my sleeve. So for my sleeve, I'm just going to be notching the midpoint of the sleeve, that's on the cap's height. I just notched it and I matched the shoulder line to the notched part. Then I just figured out how it will go to the end. Then I went ahead to fix my sleeve. Now I used ½ inch sewing allowance. So you remember I used 9 inches, which was 18 inches for my shoulder. Now I'm using half on both sides, which is going to leave me with a total of 17 inches, which is still fine because it's a bodycon dress, right? So for my own dress, by the time I was done, I used my exact measurements, and then I did not add sewing allowance. But by the time I was done, the dress was still loose. Even though I liked the fact that it was loose, it gave me breathing space, and overall I kind of like it a little bit loose like that, even though that was not the initial plan. So if I want to shape it down, I'll shape it down. So when you're sewing your own, make sure that your sewing you take out at least 3 or 4 inches out of your measurement. So assuming your hip is 48, make sure you sew something like 44, but in that case you have to add sewing allowance. So just do well to take out around maybe 2 inches off your measurements, right? So by the time I was done fixing my sleeve, I just joined my sleeve side to the side of my bodies, right? So I just matched the sleeve to the side of my bodies, and I sewed using ½ inch sewing allowance, which I'm eventually going to be using my weaving machine to chop it off anyway. I don't want seam allowances left in the dress because it has a way of looking chunky inside the dress or bulky, and it takes away that hug and beauty that the dress has, right? So I flipped it to the other side and I went ahead to sew as well, starting from the sleeve, and I sewed all the way down. So by the time I was done sewing, I went ahead to hem the dress and hem the sleeve as well. So for the hemming, I just folded it ½ inch in, and then I folded 1 inch again. So that's a total of 1.5. So you first off, you're going to be making the double fold hem, or you can just go ahead and overlock that side and just do a single hem. Whatever works for you is totally fine. I think I ended up doing the single hem as well, but I went in with my overlocker to overlock all my raw edges first. So when I was done, I just gave the dress a nice press, and on the neckline where I have that piping, I went ahead to hand tag them with a hand stitch. And this is the dress, guys. It's so beautiful. I love how free it is, but if you can see around the hip side, I told you it was a little bit loose, so I think I might end up taking in some inches off the dress to sort of give it that bodycon look. But this is it, guys. Overall, is a beautiful dress and it's something you should do. So this fabric is actually thick, a little bit thick. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, guys, please give me a thumbs up, share this video with your friends, guys, subscribe and click the notification bell to get notified whenever I have a new video up on the channel. And see you guys in my next video. Bye.